Hi, I'm Ginny Rosenkranz with the University of Maryland Extension, and I am at a beautiful garden center. This is called How Sweet It Is, and I'm here to show you how easy it is to find plants that you love, but I want you to take one more step. Don't just fall in love with a plant. I fall in love with plants all the time. I want you to learn how to read a label so you can go, oh, this will fit into my garden. I love it. It needs full sun, and that's exactly what I have. If you fall in love with a plant that it needs full sun, but you only have shade, I'm going to show you some plants that can handle shade. So join me for Delmarva Gardens, coming up next right here on Pack 14. I love hydrangeas. These are probably the neatest thing, especially late summer, early fall. These guys are at their very, very best. They thrive when we have warm weather. Hot weather, they survive just fine. And this one right here is limelight, and it doesn't seem to matter if the temperatures are 95 or 98, they still thrive. But a lot of these panicle hydrangeas, which is what this is called, it's called a panicle hydrangea because it has this large bouquet or panicle of flowers that kind of look like an ice cream cone. Yum. But limelight starts out green, and then it gets pure white as it matures. And then once it matures further, then it gets even more green. These guys bloom in the late spring, late summer, like I said, and they just are just so beautiful. The other neat thing about these guys is they only bloom on new growth. So in the early springtime, you can go ahead and cut like a third of the plant down to the ground and have all that third plant fresh, brand new growth, and you'll have all those gorgeous flowers. I've talked to some people, and they say that pruning actually gets you either humongous flowers or small flowers. So if you decide to cut all of the plant down after you've got it established for 3 or 4 years, you might get 3 or 4 branches with this flower right here, humongous, like a football. Hard to kind of work with that, kind of hard on the plant too. But if you take the plant down about a third of the way down, and maybe only 1 or 2 branches out of there, then you're going to get these gorgeous ones like that we have right here. If you decide to go ahead and cut them down maybe about 6 or 8 inches, you'll get teeny tiny flowers like this little guy here. This is like a small softball. So these are wonderful for cut flowers. So a lot of it depends on what you as a gardener want to do. Do you want to have nice big flowers to cut? Or do you want to have these gorgeous flowers so you can see them at a distance in your garden, because they do make a really, really good summer hedge, and they give you these gorgeous flowers in late summer. There's so many other things that are gorgeous too, so let me show you some more. This is a fabulous place to be going to look for things. Don't you just love evergreens? You know, evergreens are kind of like what they call the bones of a landscape, especially in the winter time, because they not only give you structure and form, but they also give you color. Most of the deciduous plants will only give you color if the bark is colorful, because all the leaves of a deciduous plant have fallen off in the autumn. But evergreen trees, they stay green all year round. Now, we are in the mid-Atlantic area, so that means that things like spruce and the fir really suffer sometimes, especially with our high heat and our dry summers. Well, I mean, we've gone through a couple of weeks already where we've had, you know, in the summertime, 3 weeks of 95+ temperatures and no rain. That's really, really hard on an evergreen especially. But now this right here, this is called a deodora cedar, and this is actually a southern evergreen. So a southern needle evergreen. It thrives in this area. It has a soft blue-green color. I think it's very, very lovely. It's actually almost petable. It doesn't have prickly foliage at all. It does not make a really good Christmas tree, but it makes a really nice evergreen. Now this is a large one. It can get to be 60 feet tall, and it can be wide. But I just love the fact that it has this lovely, graceful, arching habit, and the color is so beautiful all through the spring, summer, fall, and through the winter. So sometimes it's fun to take a look at these. And these, again, you can plant these in the fall, and they will get well established before the cold temperatures come zooming in on us. So let's go ahead and take a look at some more things. This place is full of beautiful plants. Wow. I love these. Now these are high maintenance, but they are really arborvitae, which means they love full sun. They're very, very hardy in this area. I will warn you, deer do like them. But when they've been pruned like this, they are spectacular. Now they don't fit in every single landscape. This fits in a very formal landscape. So if you have a very informal cottage garden kind of landscape, they wouldn't fit at all. You need something softer like the deodar cedar we just saw. But this is really cool. Now this requires a lot of maintenance because you're always having to trim it so that you can keep this beautiful spiral going. And so because you do have to trim it so closely so often, you really want to make sure, take a really good look just to make sure that there aren't any spider mites or any other kind of insects that would affect this, because this is really tight. Not a lot of air goes in here, but it's still kind of a fun thing to play with. And it makes a statement. This would be great for somebody who had a very formal property, who had like an entranceway or something like that, because it draws your attention right to this really cool spiral. Fun. Another late summer bloomer is our native hibiscus. Now this looks like a woody hibiscus, and you think, oh my gosh, you know, this is not a herbaceous perennial, but even though it looks like it's got a lot of wood to it, it really is a very strong, sturdy, but it is still an herbaceous perennial, which means that in the fall, all the foliage will fall off, but also the plant will actually die all the way down to the roots. So in the late fall, after all this beautiful stuff is gone, then you want to cut it down, but you want to leave about 2 to 3 inches above the soil so you know, oh, that's right, that's where I planted the hibiscus. But right now, end of summer, these are just spectacular. This is cranberry crush, gorgeous dark red color. Look at that beautiful thing. They always have 5 petals that are overlapping. Some of them have a soft or entire margin on the petals, and others have like a ruffled or a jagged one. There are just so many different colors and textures, mostly reds and pinks, but then there's whites and blushes. And right now there's some varieties that actually have some streaks to them. But here's a gorgeous cranberry crush, and right beside it, this is a beautiful one. This is called Head Over Heels Passion. Look at the colors in that. Isn't that gorgeous? Now I will say this is a wonderful plant for hummingbirds, because they'll come and they'll get all the nectar here and they'll get the pollen here. And so butterflies, hummingbirds just adore all of these. Now there's some varieties of the native hibiscus, and this is a cultivar of a native hibiscus that get to be as tall as this. This is almost 5 feet. But there's some that are more compact and so maybe 2 to 3 feet tall. So it depends on what size you have, but you have to have these in full sun. They're not happy in the shade. They just don't like you anymore in the shade. So let's go ahead and take a couple looks at some more sun lovers. Woo! Don't you love grasses? Now grasses, again, are a plant that need to have full sun. Now, there's all types of different types of grasses, but this is a native grasses. This is called panicum, or called switchgrass. This is a switchgrass too. This is the species, and this one is called northwind. So you can tell the difference between these flowers, or panicums here, are very open and light, whereas the panicums on this new cultivar are tighter, and the whole plant is a good deal tighter. Isn't that cool looking though? I just love this. Now this is the type of thing that actually some of the native birds will actually eat a lot of the seeds of this too. So what is cool about the northwind is it's very sturdy, very upright. It makes a wonderful vertical, almost like a summer hedge. And you don't cut this down until early springtime. So you keep all that nice growth right there all through the winter. But all through the summer, it grows tall. This time of year, it has these beautiful flowers right now. And then it turns to seeds. The seeds turn to a soft, sort of a champagne color, which is real pretty. And then the foliage turns a deeper blue. So right now, it has this really pretty sort of a blue-gray color. And here's a newer variety right there, a really good blue-gray color. I just think they're really pretty. The other thing is when you're looking at the garden center, sometimes you say, okay, well, what is it? How can I tell? And they'll have signs. So this one right here says, it is northwind switchgrass, Panicum virginium northwind. It's an ornamental grass. It tells you what it is, upright vase-shaped habit. Nothing can push this grass over. That's kind of cool. Nice blue-green foliage and an airy cloud-like panicle. Again, panicle is the bouquet of seeds right here. So the other thing that you want to look at when you're looking for, should you buy this plant here or not, it has a hardiness zone of 5 to 9. We're in a hardiness zone, that means a USDA zone, and we're in 7B. So we are definitely between 5 and 9, which is good. Tells you how high it's going to get, 4 to 6 feet, and how wide it's going to spread. That's important too. So it is going to spread 24 to 36 inches, and that's pretty much it. That means that this is a plant you can plant as a grass, and it's not going to take over your entire yard. But it can go ahead and be planted, like I said, as an accent or even a hedge. And it's just so gorgeous. Tell you what, there's other things that are in bloom this time of year. Let's go take a look at some of those. You know, I know that these roses right here look like they're kind of like on their last step, but as the temperatures cool off, roses begin to bloom again. Now, these are knockout roses, which means that they bloom basically all summer long. They're sterile, so every time they bloom, they're trying to go ahead and be fertilized, but they're sterile, so the flower petals will die off. The plant will self-clean itself, which I think is wonderful, and then more flowers. The only downside on these is that it's not good for pollinators, but in sheer color and texture in your garden, these are spectacular. So we have some red, we have some pink, behind us we have some yellows, and they're just all wonderful. The other thing to remember about these is when you see something like this, you say, oh, well, they're done, but take a look, there's still some new buds that are just now beginning. Here's one right here, here's another. So that means that they're going to continue to bloom all through the fall. And you want to go ahead and keep these as they are. If they get to be like 6 feet tall, maybe you want to cut them down to about 2 feet so that the winter winds don't pull them and break them apart. But come springtime, just before the new leaves emerge, you want to go ahead and cut these all down to about 1 foot off the ground. They bloom best on new foliage. And even though that's kind of a lot of prickly stuff to do, these guys will look spectacular. I want to share something else that's still blooming and just thriving this time of year is a crepe myrtle. Now I remember one of my friends said that they were so tired of crepe myrtles because they just bloom like crazy. I'm like, what's not to love about that? Isn't that what we celebrate summer and even the early part of fall, because that's when so many things still bloom beautifully. So this one right here is a new cultivar. It's called Purple Magic. It's a dwarf variety. It has beautiful, gorgeous, bright purple flowers. It's called a crepe myrtle because the flower petals look like crepe paper. And then they have these bright yellow anthers, which is the male part of the flower. Just really, really pretty. And this is even showing some of the autumn color that in the fall, this plant will turn this beautiful kind of a burnt orange color, which I think is spectacular. They're not going to do that until a really, really cold spell comes, but just knowing that you're going to have, you know, gorgeous summer color and then some really interesting fall color makes it worthwhile. So just the other thing you want to do is read to see how tall these get. I'm always talking to people who want to cut their crepe myrtles down because they're way too tall. Before you do that, purchase one that's the size that you want. So you can read the label, find out how tall it's going to get, how wide it's going to get. These guys, again, need full sun for them to do their very best. If you have shade, there's other plants to look at, but not the crepe myrtles. We'll take a look at some other beautiful things that are in bloom. Now, the traditional azaleas like to bloom in the spring, but you know, people who are plant lovers just cannot have just one thing. So what they've done is they've encouraged azaleas to bloom both spring and fall. Those are called encore. So this one right here, I think it's called Autumn Brilliance. Let me double check on that. Again, that's what's good about these signs. So Autumn Fire. Notice how this is a really gorgeous dark red fiery one. I love this. There's also Autumn Embers, which is this bright, bright orange color. Look at how orange that is. Very, very lovely. And it blooms in the fall. You do have to give it water. You have to make sure that they're well fertilized. Now these guys are a little bit taller and they're also encores. This one right here is Autumn Empress, and she's a really pretty, if you take a look, it's the petals are doubles. So you have these two flowers together, the petals are doubles. Really cool. And this one right here is Autumn Sangria. Really pretty single petals, bright, bright pink. But if you're going to read the signs, which I think is good, it tells you that it's autumn sangria. It's a rhododendron, of course. It tells you it blooms spring, summer, and fall. Here in the area where we are, it's mostly spring and fall. It doesn't usually have a chance to bloom in the summer. Sometimes it's just too hot. But our spring, and then to have it again to bloom in the fall, that's a lot of fun. So it also tells you the height. So this gets to be 4.5 feet high, 4 feet wide. It tells you what color the flower is and how the blooms are, and they can bloom 3.5 inches across, a big flower, which is kind of cool. That it's hardy. Let's see now, to the USDA zones from 6 to 10. Again, we're 7, so we're okay. And then this is light shade to full sun. When they say light shade, they mean afternoon shade, especially here, especially for rhododendrons. It's species like an azalea. And then it also tells you how you should take care of the soil. This should be moist, well-drained, acidic soils. Perfect for the Eastern Shore. Just don't plant it in clay, because clay has got a little bit too heavy and it doesn't drain as well. So there's all kinds of things that you can take a look at that are still in bloom this time of year. But there's some gorgeous evergreens. So let's take a look at some of those. Well, I love hollies because, again, they're evergreens, so they give you color all through the season. They provide flowers for the pollinators. These are hollies, so they have flowers. These are actually starting to bloom a little bit. Sometimes that happens in the early fall. And so you'll have flowers for the pollinators, you have berries for the birds, and then you have all this wonderful evergreen area where birds can go ahead and survive over the winter. When there's a lot of really strong winds, they can hunker down here and be protected where they can't in like a deciduous tree with just only having stems and twigs. So this is really lovely. And this is one of the dark green hollies. It's what they call it, one of the blue hollies. If you take a look at the leaves have points on them, but they're fairly soft. I mean, I can't do that with an American holly. So this one is called Castile Sprite, which is kind of cool. And apparently, well, I would have to look up to see how tall it gets because they don't have that kind of information on here. So that's the kind of thing that when you come to a garden center, write it down, or I take a picture of what kind of plant it is, then I go back and look it up, or if they have good internet, you can look it up right there on your cell phone and find out, is this what you want? Now this one right here also looks just like a holly, and it's a real pretty one that's variegated. Notice how it's got some light green here, and then as it matures, it goes from almost pure yellow and white, and then as it matures, it gets a lot more green. But this is not a holly. They call it a false holly. This is an osmanthus. And the way you can tell the difference is the foliage on this one, I'll pull this one up right here, is opposite. These leaves are exact opposite here, and opposite here, and opposite there. So these are opposites, whereas a holly has alternates. So if you take a look at the branch right here, you have a leaf here on this side, a leaf on that side, a leaf on this side, a leaf on that side. So these are alternate, and these are opposite. Holly and osmanthus. They're all beautiful and they all thrive in this area, which is really, really good. So if you want to have something that's going to be evergreen for you throughout the winter and give you protection or a hedge from the winter winds, these are things you could look for and say, this is what I want to have in my garden. Again, it does well in full sun, but these can take a little bit of shade. That's always a good consideration because not everybody has full sun. So let's take a look at a couple more things real quick. What's nice about this time of year is there are some plants that are just spectacular, and they don't really look like anything during the spring and the summertime, but in the fall when they bloom and then the foliage turns this gorgeous red, they're worth looking at. This is a native staghorn fern, and it's sumac, and it has these gorgeous red flowers that turn into red berries. You can see that it's already still in bloom. And when it does turn color in the autumn, look at this color. It's a gorgeous red, absolutely spectacular. Now, you often see these growing on the side of the road, and a lot of people will go, well, they're just a trash tree. Not really. These guys are really good. When they're in bloom, a lot of times the pollinators just go, oh my gosh, they love it because this is one of the last things to bloom. And all the native pollinators just think the world of these staghorn sumacs. So this is the type of thing that if you have an area that is full sun, a little bit out of the way, and you want to do something good for pollinators, plant a grove of this. They will continue to make their own groves. You really only need one or two if you want. But they'll come up from the roots and you'll have sooner or later a nice little grove of staghorn sumac. Now behind the sumac there's another native plant right here, and this is a vitex. Now here's what the flower looks like when it blooms. It's soft, beautiful blue, but it blooms late in the fall. So you see all these buds just ready to just burst into bloom. They're so pretty. And they can handle a little bit of wet feet, so they're really good for the eastern shore, especially when you have a high water table. It is wonderful to plant all these gorgeous native plants, but there's one more plant I have to share with you. It is not a native, but it is so worthwhile. If you have the right location, you need to find room for it. So let's go check out the Japanese maple. They're spectacular. Isn't this a spectacular plant right here? So this is a Japanese maple, but it's not just a Japanese maple. It's called a cut leaf Japanese maple, which means that the foliage is really dissected. This whole thing right here is one leaf, and it has all these little teeny dissections of it. So it's like little leaflets almost. It's so lacy and airy. It's absolutely beautiful. So this one, again, you should always try to find the tag. This one says it's a Japanese maple, Tamukiana, and it says it's going to get 4 to 5 feet tall. And that means that it's going to get broader, but it'll be about this height and no higher. What's nice about these guys is if you have a shady area, this plant will thrive in it. Just loves that kind of stuff. Actually, if you plant it in full sun, the foliage can really burn badly. So if you're going to plant it where it has sun, morning sun would be good. But once it gets at least up to noon, you really have to have this in the shade. But I just love the arching, and the canopy has it just kind of makes a small umbrella. It just looks absolutely beautiful. And in the fall, my goodness, this foliage right here turns scarlet. Absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to put this tag right back on again so people can figure out what it is when they buy it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the tour of a garden center. We didn't cover absolutely everything because there's so much to look at. And I just wanted to show you things that were in bloom through the summer that are still blooming in the fall, or plants that have really good fall foliage. And you know, it's just take your time and visit garden centers and just enjoy them because they're so beautiful. So thank you for joining me for Delmarva Gardens right here on Pack 14.